Welcome everyone to the special edition of Kiwi Talks. I am speaking to the legendary and underrated composers of the English dub of Dragon Ball Z, which are Mike Smith, Scott Morgan, and Julius Dobos. How are you guys doing?
Great, man.
Yeah?
Yeah, doing well.
That's good. That's good. I just wanted to double check that your mental health is all good, given the pandemic that we're going through right now, that you guys are all healthy, you're staying safe, staying away from people who are coughing.
Doing our best.
Wear your mask. Wear your mask. Don't be stupid. Wear your mask.
Wear the mask.
That's the advice. So tell me how this all started. We better start with you, Mike, because you're the OG of this. You're the one that started it all. And from what I understand, it was your gear that you were using originally when you started composing the soundtrack for Dragon Ball Z. It was mostly your samples?
Well, it was a mix. I was using a sampler called Roland S70. Is that what it was?
S760.
760. That was a standard for Bruce Faulconer. And
it was a standard in the industry.
But I brought in what's called an Alesis QS6 to the situation, and I used that a lot. So a lot of the early sound does come off of just the straight off the shelf Alesis QS6.
Right.
And then,
because I've heard your stuff in your little band, and it's quite different to what you composed initially from the get-go.
My little band?
Well, sorry, not your little band. Your band, I should say.
I'm kidding with you. I do use one patch on the QS6 with the safety meaning. It's called the 74 square.
Right.
That one kind of quite a bit, yeah. But with Dragon Ball Z, there were many, many more QS6 patches that got into the sound.
Were you given much direction from Bruce or from Funimation at all?
Okay, well, this is something Scott and I disagree about.
Okay.
Well, not disagree, but I actually trust Scott's memory more on this. But apparently we did get a lot of direction from Funimation. We got like scripts that told us what to write, what they wanted to have in each scene. Now, I think I didn't pay them much money. Is that fair to say, Scott?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so we did get some direction, but I kind of just watched the scenes and did what I wanted. I did the directions,
They were actually so detailed that it was impossible to follow. Like, if you think the score was crazy and switched on a dime too much, what they asked for was even worse. And they knew it was ridiculous. They were just like trying to give as much, because I talked to the guys at one point about it, and they said that they knew that it was good.
I have very little recollection of ever referring to notes in the script. I would mostly watch what was on screen. It was all new to me. Every time that we'd get a new chase tape, it was like, this is a brand new episode to me. Watch it and, plan out the job and go for it, which usually I think worked out pretty well.
So is that how all three of you did it when you were scoring? You'd score to the screen?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Mostly. There were times when we wrote music just for a character, or for even just like before Garlic Jr Saga hit, we didn't have any tapes. So I printed out pictures from the internet. There's a site called planetnamek.com that doesn't exist anymore, but I printed out pictures of all the characters and what was called the demon mist back then, because Funimation hadn't invented the term Blackwater Mist yet. And so we wrote music just based on those pictures, or just based on what we wanted to write. And then when we finally got the shows, we applied these beds of music to the episodes that we got, which they didn't even give us the English dub at first. We were scoring to the Japanese dub for the first little bit.
Oh,
The
right.
same thing applies to the Ginyu Saga a little bit, because we'd come up. I guess I came up with a bunch of ideas before we'd ever even seen the cartoon. That then once we had it and we had chase tapes, we had some film to write to, that it was like, oh well, this piece might work in here on this scene or whatever. So that was a good part of what went into the Ginyu Saga.
For me, the script was useful sometimes, though, because I didn't know the show until I started working on it. And even though I think we were all scoring to the picture and just watching the episode and trying to hit the mood and characters and whatnot, but sometimes the script clarified a few things for me. Not just the script, but the director's notes on the script. You know, you can attack the same scene in 5 million different ways, but to me, always there was a little bit of, okay, this is how I would like to do it, but let's just check to make sure the script agrees with me, kind of thing. So almost like a confirmation type of thing. I did check the script, but otherwise, I think we're all just scoring to the scenes, basically.
Right. So how do you guys write? Do you think of something in your head, like a melody in your head? Do you start with a chord progression? Like, how do you guys go about composing something?
I think we all do it differently, I would assume. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And it
imagine
depends
all
on
be
the
different.
piece. It depends on the piece for me. Like, I compose differently for many different, you know, like one scene I might do it one way, another scene I might do it totally different way. So yeah, sometimes it starts with chords, sometimes it starts with melody, sometimes it starts with a drum beat, you know, or just an idea of instruments, or it whatever hits me first, you know, I kind of go with that. And with Dragon Ball and with the TV schedule, usually I had the strategy of, okay, what do I know that's going to work for the scene? Because we didn't have a lot of time, so there wasn't a lot of time to experiment. And if I had an idea that I thought was going to absolutely work, that was simple to do, then I would do that.
Because
I want to add to that also that for me, and I think for the other two guys here too, that personally, one of the most important things that I took out of my college education was that as a composer, you should always be original. You don't redo somebody else's work, right?
Mm.
And so it always would start from there. What's something that sounds new and original, you know, and then move on from there.
To me, it's also different because composition-wise, I tend to I try to hear the whole piece the way I would like it to sound, and I rarely build it up from an idea, but rather I have the idea with the instrumentation, with the orchestration, kind of how I feel like it would work for the scene, and I just try to recreate what's in my head, as opposed to, you know, like adding this, adding that, and taking away. For me, there was just not enough time to experiment so much. And also the sounds, to me, that was always a big factor, and that's, I think we talked about this before in an interview or somewhere, that we all wished we had had more time to design even more interesting sounds or even more unique sounds for you know, let's just create instruments and create interesting patches and stuff. But often we defaulted back to the, you know, the characteristic sounds of DBZ, and I really wish we could have taken it farther, but that takes time. But once in a while, when there was a little weekend or a little break, then, you know, a sound came out of a synth that really worked for a character, and let's play around with that sound, and that became a piece.
Mm.
Yeah, that was fun. One time, Mike went to the hardware store and bought a bunch of stuff, and we had a recording fest in the studio. Like, I think we recorded some sheet metal strips going whoop, 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 whoop. You hear those in the Android and Cell Saga, I think.
Yeah.
And then we recorded me playing a violin doing squeaky sounds.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the variety of sounds that you can get out of a violin. And
So you were doing
Scott, speak to that for a second.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you get glissandos, beep, 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 bits. I mean, tell us about it, Scott. It was really your idea to bring in the violin.
Oh, I had been watching Cartoon Network, Powerpuff Girls, and a lot of other silly things on there, and I was hearing a lot of those violin sounds. So really, we were kind of just ripping them off.
But it was great. We did make a collection of little snippets and stuff that could be worked into songs where it was appropriate.
Did you use it a lot for like comedy segments?
Yeah, more for comedy than anything else.
Yeah.
I remember
we added a lot. Whenever you see Bulma blinking, blink, blink, like that's not a sound effect. That's actually part of the music soundtrack.
Mike went to town with the samples. It was really funny to hear all of it.
I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it.
He would take one of my slides and he would pitch it way down, and you hear like, whoa, so much weird crap.
That's fun.
That's cool.
Reaper. And somebody was turning their head. Reaper.
Because
I'm weird like that though. I remember there was one time where Scott was like, I need to replay this guitar part because there's too many fret noises in there, and I'm like, no, fret noises are the best part, man. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. You and Bruce both ganged up on me on that. It's like guitar players. Oh my god.
Because the thing is, you three have very different styles, but it was so seamless in the way the soundtrack was done that it sounded like it was one person. So how did you make sure? Yeah, how did you make sure you kept the continuity there?
I think
I can definitely tell who wrote what.
Reused. Actually, a lot of things are reused. We had a huge library of the previously composed music, and previous pieces made it into pretty much every show. And so
edited in.
Yeah, so that was like a lot of musical editing, and of course sometimes we added layers and whatnot, expanded on older pieces and edited it in a way that it would not be like just like in your face the old piece, but I think that worked kind of as a glue, and that kind of brought all the different components together. I remember in the Buu Saga, Mike and I sometimes would discuss like who's gonna work on which character, which scene for the same show, and then we decided like, okay, we're gonna edit something in between, like a transition type of thing from an older piece that was in our library. And so we knew whoever was doing the first piece kind of how to flow into that transition and how to come out of that, and the other person would continue with the new piece. So it's not that like we actually sat down and wrote together. We worked in separate studio rooms as well, but we kind of knew what the goal was on the timeline, and so we just kind of filled in our parts and keep that in mind. What were the sounds to use? That was actually a big challenge. I don't know if you guys even remember this, or I don't even know if I actually ever talked about this, but when I came on board, I still remember that Mike was like, well, we have to use those sounds. And I was like, yeah, but I have my own instruments. I want to use these because my strings sound better. Kind of funny.
I'm sure they did.
and that's the thing that they did, but they sound a little bit too good.
Right.
If you just go by the quality of the sample, but that wasn't really what the show necessarily needed. So I ended up adapting a lot of the sounds, and I had a QS in my studio room there, and of course the 760 sampler. So some of the instruments that we used were also shared, and the samples we shared too. Like we passed around the samples from the 760. So we used the same modified Marcado string that had the attack chopped off because it was too late, and these kind of things, like we solved and we were used. But then we also brought in our unique kind of elements, and that included gear and also compositional approach. Yeah.
And so I think that what Julius was just talking about, with having sort of a shared library of sounds, and the fact that we were editing transitions or pieces in, I think that probably did help it to be a consistent feel throughout the sagas.
You mentioned how rushed you were for time. Like, how much time did you actually have from the minute you got an episode? How much time did you actually have till it had to be finished?
Well, okay, we would do as many as 3 episodes a week, which is 21 minutes per episode. Let's basically say it could be 60 minutes of episode due at the end of the week.
That was like max speed though. Yeah.
Right. it was not always that pace, but yeah, it could get
the
up
average would be like 3 days maybe. Because I remember often the chase tape came late, and of course they still wanted to pick it up on time, and like we're losing time with every minute that we're not receiving the tape that had the version that we're scoring. So I think the average would be like 3 days, and sometimes we knew about the characters that were coming on in the next episode, so we would kind of start writing maybe a character theme and get it ready for actual scoring.
Yeah. When I first came on, I was just doing editing, and it usually took me about 2 days to do an episode. Because I wasn't writing yet, but if we needed new music, I would throw something, say, hey, I need music for this scene, Mike, and then he would write something, and usually in 2 or 3 days we could put it together. But there were more difficult episodes that took a week or maybe even longer. But yeah, I'd say I would agree 3 days is probably about average, because most episodes took about 2 or 3 days, and then there was tougher ones that took a little bit longer. But
and sometimes we'd get multiple episodes at the same time, so it's like a little bit of overlap between a couple of guys on those days too.
Yeah, and we didn't know.
I might be writing a piece for this episode while Scott's editing out this stuff and coming up with, hey, I need a new piece for this part while I'm still working on the previous episode or something like that, right?
And when I first got there, I remember the first 3 or 4 episodes I did were a little bit out of order too, so we didn't always necessarily do them in the order that you see them.
Oh, so you could be editing episodes out of sync. So they might not be the 3 episodes in a row. They could be all out of order.
Yeah, like
but let's be real. How much difference was there between episode 76 and episode 77?
yeah, that's
especially
true.
in the Frieza saga. But yeah, like my first episode was number 78, but I didn't work on 79 or 80 at all. I think my second one was 81 or 82. So yeah, there's an example of how it skipped around. Right from the beginning when I first started.
I want to ask you about a few different pieces individually, but I'll start with you, Mike, in terms of Vegeta's stuff, which is pretty iconic, the Hell's Bells and the Super Saiyan themes. What was your approach when you started writing them?
Well, I mean, Vegeta, he's arguably the best character in Dragon Ball Z, right? Because he's so complicated.
Yeah, I agree.
So it was, a little bit evil, but a little bit triumphant, right? Now, specifically for Vegeta Super Saiyan, the idea that I thought of there when I was watching him on picture was a cold engine trying to start up, trying to crank.
Because that's an interesting.
It goes, and then you're ready to roll, right?
It's an interesting piece.
That was my.
Yeah. It's an interesting piece because it changes time signature as well, doesn't it, through the piece?
It goes 7/8 to 4/4. Yeah.
Yes. I was wondering what time signature it was at the beginning. I was thinking that is not 4/4. What?
Well, for you budding young composers out there, don't steal that idea. No, I'm just kidding.
Steal it.
There's a really good rush that goes along once you get somebody rolling on the 7/8, and then you kick it into the 4/4. Just like, whoa, now we're doing it, right?
Yeah.
So I'd recommend that. Yeah. Go for that all the time.
Did you foresee the themes becoming as iconic as they did?
I honestly, it has been pretty recent, like last few years, that I have come to realize that this thing had legs, that people were still into it. And if it weren't for Scott really keeping up on this and keeping the love alive like he has, and thank you, Scott, it just would have been a job I did a long time ago.
Well, I have a theme song on my phone, the Super Saiyan. It's my ringtone. Just so you know.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So if I'm in a meeting or something,
when it gets to 4/4, they're about to hang up and give up on you.
It was actually the Super Saiyan Vegeta theme that got me onto YouTube, because I saw a person on the internet doing just a single note at a time piano version of that, and it had like 11,000 views or something. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool that people are actually into this score. Because, you know, when it first came out, people were used to the Japanese score or the Ocean dub, and so there was a lot of hatred online. But so that's when I really opened my eyes. I was like, there actually is a community online that really loves this score, and they're getting and they're starting to grow up and post things on YouTube. And so I thought, wow, what if I was to put up some music with the original synths, and you know.
Yeah.
So it was the Vegeta Super Saiyan theme that was the first kind of sign to me.
There's so many covers. I mean, it must be, I don't know if it's weird or mind-boggling to think that there's so many people out there that remix your work. I mean,
it's the most covered song ever.
Yeah.
I think Julius has that one with the SSJ3.
Yeah, maybe Julius has that one.
That's a good segue, actually. So, Julius, with the Super Saiyan 3 theme, what was your approach to writing that?
You know, what we knew was that it had to be big. It had to be something new that goes beyond where it has gone before. And really, musically, that was the idea. Also, given the character, it had to relate to previous themes, even as close as the opening theme. So we tried to incorporate all these parts, and actually, in the beginning, Bruce and I discussed that what would be the parts that we should want to use, and then just got to work. And first, actually, I remember, interesting that you asked, because I didn't even think about this before, that the first version was double tempo. And it felt like they had a lot of energy and drive, and also, of course, the ascending progression, you know, it just keeps going up and up and up. So that kind of took care of it, but it felt a little bit too actiony. So like da 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 da. So like we thought, okay, well, this is maybe a little bit, you know, too much of an action type of theme. So so then I changed the third measure to make it 2 measures actually. So that became 3 and 4, and then just still didn't feel right. And then everything kind of slowed down, and then it felt much more like bigger, more epic, but still going up. So the drums was the biggest driving factor, and originally I wanted to mix it with, and I did mix it with more drums in it. I wanted to make it a more percussive piece, and of course, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think we really used loops or anything pre-made, and at that time it wasn't even that big of a deal that, you know, you.
Oh, I never.
I did it for one piece. Only one time I did it.
You want that did?
A track called
Yeah, but
Future Trunks.
that was more like a tape piece, tape loops, than it was like a looping program, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was in Pro Tools, like actually, it was very unconventional the way I did it. I was lining up samples, and
exactly.
We had a guy in the studio named Trevor who didn't work on Dragonball.
He hated that piece.
Oh, yeah.
But he loved to do. He was a rave guy, and he had a collection of beats, and he gave me a zip disk full of stuff, and I played around with it one time and made what is called Future Trunks. It's this techno-y electronic.
Yeah, it's never like that, like really obscure Japanese underground electronic music in the early 2000s. So that was an interesting influence. I remember I had great conversations with Trevor about electronic music, and he had some interesting stuff. But so the drums for that, I forgot exactly what I used. I think it was the 2 Rolands, JV 1080 and the 990, and sequence these drums and like play them by hand. And I really liked how they sounded. I wanted to make them bigger, and I had this big like orchestral timpani, you know, orchestral bass drum type of hits with it, but they started feeling like too orchestral, too big. And for the character, you know, you expect to hear more guitar and more the what you typically would hear for the main character, right? So So that didn't. I ended up not using that, but it still came out quite big because I ended up slowing it down. No, not slowing it down, but just doing it like a halftime, and I think that was the right decision there.
Totally. Yeah, that's a good call.
Because that's another thing that's very iconic. Did you foresee that happening as well? Were you like, oh yeah, I've got this. This is going to be awesome.
I don't think you ever foresee anything becoming iconic.
It's kind of the opposite. I mean, I always, when we talk about this, when we get this question, I always say, like, please don't get this the wrong way. I'm not diminishing the success of our own work and of course the series, but honestly, for me, I started it as just another job, and I finished it just another job. It's not because because this was my 21st of the same caliber, but simply when you're scoring movies, you really, if you do things right, you don't care about fame, you don't care about how your music is going to live on its own, but what you care about is how it's going to support the show, how it's really helps to tell the story. And if what you see the reaction is that people are really celebrating the show, and you know that your music was part of creating that, then you're successful. And honestly, you move on to the next project. So you don't really normally don't think about what if this, like kind of got its own life and as a music piece, and what would happen then, until of course someone publishes your work.
Yeah.
So I had some inkling, I will say, because I was probably the most connected on the internet, looking at like because the show was already iconic, right? Like before we even touched it, it was already huge, and I got wind of like what a big deal Spirit Bomb was, and what a big deal going Super Saiyan was, and so I knew ahead of time that those were big things. And so I was really excited that my first track was going to be working on the Spirit Bomb. And then when Mike was going to do the Super Saiyan theme for the first time, I was pretty jealous, actually, because I knew that was going to be a really big moment. And he was nice enough.
I'm sorry. I was going to do the what theme?
The Super Saiyan theme. He
Super
was jealous
Saiyan
of you.
Yeah, he was nice enough to actually take me. We had this spot where we used to go like sit outside and think about what we were going to do before we wrote anything. And he was nice enough to take me out there and talk to me about what he was going to do for Super Saiyan before he wrote it. So,
are you talking about Vegeta Super Saiyan?
No.
This is Goku.
Super Saiyan.
This is the first Super Saiyan time ever. Because I was making a big deal out of it, because I was like, the guys, this is going to be big. Like, and so we talked about that one a little bit before you scored it, which is cool. And it came out really well.
I've got to say, when we were doing it, Scott was much more forward looking on the episodes than I was, man. I just took them as they came, right, Scott?
Yeah, I was looking ahead a little bit. Another guy who really, somebody who was even better than me about that was Ben Kasparek, who was our editor.
Very, very talented Ben Kasparek. Yes. Excellent music editor.
He came on the show he moved from Florida to work on this show, and he was a fan before that. He was one of those guys who had ordered VHS tapes from disparate places. So he knew the whole.
This was his dream job when it was nobody's dream job.
Right.
Yeah. None of us knew about the show really before we started working, but Ben did. Right. And his favorite episode of all time was when Gohan kills Cell. And he did that episode all by himself with just editing. And when we reviewed it, like usually we make little changes to something or write a scene for here and there or add a little thing here and there to fix up transitions. But he had really worked on that episode. And I remember Mike and I reviewed it, and we were just like, perfect, dude. And we shipped it as is, just as he edited it.
Well, yeah, I remember that episode. It was really well done. Really well done.
Dude, Ben was great. He had not only a talent for identifying the right pieces of music to put in there, but then he could edit them in correctly to where it was seamless the whole way. He was fantastic. And we got to see Ben just I guess a couple of years ago, right?
At KamehaCon.
Yeah.
There's a picture of the four of us, on our SSJ page.
He's still a cool dude.
Once you're cool, you're always cool, though, aren't you?
That's not necessarily true.
So Scott, one of the themes that I love by you, man, is the destruction theme. Which is, yeah, that is such a cool theme. So tell me how you went about writing that.
That was a funny story because I don't know if some guys know this already, but that was the third take of Trunks' soundtrack. Originally, they had this trailer that Mike scored for Trunks that had, Trunks slashing his sword and his name flashing on the screen.
Yes, I saw that.
And so that's where the da 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 da. That's where that melody came from. And originally I had gone in and written this little thing I called Episodic Trunks that was supposed to be for, more low key moments or epic slow moments. And then we scored the show with those themes in there, and they rejected us and said they wanted it they actually told us that Trunks was a villain and that he was going to turn bad or something. and they wanted it heavier. And so Mike went in and wrote a bunch of industrial stuff, and we turned that score in, and they were like, no, we want heavy beyond belief. And so I was like, well, I could give you heavy beyond belief. And so I didn't have a 7-string guitar at the time, but my brother-in-law did. So I borrowed a guitar from him, and then I recorded him doing an inhale scream through a guitar distortion pedal. It's like, I don't know if you can hear it really well, but it's in the track.
I could hear that really well.
You could hear a scream. I mean, like in the track. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but there's actually, you could hear the screaming going on in the track. And so I just recorded, the metal stuff that I liked. And I went as heavy as I could. I didn't necessarily think it was right for the scenes and all that, but I was like, you want heavy? Here it is,
Let me ask you something, Scott. Is this at the same time, wasn't there a guy at Funimation that was in like a death metal band, and he wanted his death metal band to be playing the Dragon Ball Z music at that particular time?
I don't know about that. There was a
so I just imagine there was some influence from this fella, and I'm not naming names. There was a guy
named Evan Jones who was a drummer, but he wasn't in a death metal band. He did have a band, but they were him and another guy, the Ginyu voice actor.
So you are naming names.
So he and I think it's. Please forgive me if I got the name wrong for the Ginyu. It's one of the Ginyu voice actors. They are the ones who organized the band soundtracks for the movies. And so there was that whole thing. And I think the Ginyu guy did produce music for those movies that's in there beyond what they had licensed from the bands. So there's that. But as far as
I imagine that the pressure to make it all super crazy hard came from within.
Maybe so. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Honestly, that doesn't always make great soundtrack music.
Yeah, but I was just like, okay, this is third take. I'm gonna do it, and there's no way they can reject it. Here's the heaviest shit that I got.
Yeah.
And I love Beyond Belief. Beyond Belief's one of my favorites to play.
Thanks, man.
Even though I'm just going yup.
It's an awesome theme. I mean, I play it when I'm at the gym working out. It's just it amps you up. It really
Another thing that was funny about that is next door there was a guy recording a commercial sound thing for a commercial with something like air sir, and so and then like that was in the main control room, and then I'm in this little office next door going boom 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 like loud as fuck. Can I say bad
yes,
words?
You can swear. It's all good.
and it was funny because I was worried, and I think Bruce did say keep it down a little bit, but he knew that I needed to record the guitars and the mics so that it had good tone and all that. But it was funny because the guy who was singing all this cheesy music came out to me one time, and he was like, "Man, I really dig the kind of progressive, edgy stuff you're doing in there. It's really good." I was like surprised to hear that.
That's cool.
It was awesome.
I think the last thing that you wrote before you left Faulconer Productions was the Pikkons theme, wasn't it? It was
That's
like
correct.
your swan song, and it's like,
Yeah.
which is awesome. It's like you just spazzed out on the keyboard, like.
Yeah, the very ending. I didn't have that in there originally, and it wasn't even supposed to be part of the track. Like, it was just Ben Kasparek, we were just talking about him earlier. He came to me and said, "Look, Pikkon has this swirling attack thing, and we really need something for that." And so I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was funny because I used a technique that I learned from a tutorial. I don't know if you knew Jordan Rudis is from Dream Theater, but before he was in Dream Theater, he did a tutorial video for the keyboard that I have, which is the K2500. And he has this little trick he did for arpeggiations, and I used that trick along with the patch that had arpeggiations on it already, and so it just made this crazy swirling arpeggio sound when I did that, and I tagged that to the end of the track so that Ben had something to use for the flying tornado move or whatever it's called.
See, I always thought you were trying to take a Phillip Glass tune and turn it up to 11.
No, I actually wasn't thinking that. That's interesting, though. Huh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Now,
Do you know who Phillip Glass is? Is that reference lost
yeah,
on you?
I know who Phillip Glass is. Yep.
Okay.
I definitely know who he is. Yep. He's quite legendary.
Phase.
Ira Glass's uncle.
I like those phase pieces.
I didn't know that though.
Yeah.
Now you guys all worked on a villain theme, which is all cool. Mike, I know you because you worked on all three villains, right? Frieza, Cell, and Buu.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you, when you were writing these themes, how did you approach each one differently? Because Frieza's more.
Well, I got to say, Buu was the most obvious, right?
Yeah.
Because he's just like a piece of candy that comes out, and he's evil, but it's just something a kid wants to play with. So it's, it was very much just like a dink, 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 a toy to start with, right? And then over time that theme builds up. Cell was like a pimp, right? So that had to be real, groovy, that like strutting down the street kind of thing. And then Frieza, I don't know what was.
He had the two notes.
What would we even consider to be a Frieza?
It was like
It was like
backwards.
2 notes. It was mainly 2 notes, I think it was. It was
Okay,
more ambience, I think.
It's
You know
the
what
Jaws
sticks
theme
out to me with
backwards.
Frieza Bags sticks out to me the most.
Yeah, that's a great track. It's a very good
one that
track.
I love to hear. Yeah.
I would say though that even though on the surface and when he appeared, Buu was pretty much of a 50-50% mix of childlike and evil. But I think there the challenge was that it was going on for so long and so many iterations and evolutions, and you can't just keep the same music playing because it's at the core the same character. But through all those evolutions, the music had to relate to the previous one, so they had to be a unifying theme, obviously. But then the instrument, I don't know if you noticed, but the instrumentation changed, the harmonies changed, the sounds change, everything starts changing as Buu is changing through like 20 episodes or whatever. Man.
As it should, yeah.
Well, and as we were doing it, and I was working with Julius a lot on this, that's, I think, my favorite stuff, just because it gets to be so orchestral, so like big, symphonic thing almost. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's a mix of, there's a lot of electronica going on in there, but it's to me,
because it's the same theme underneath. That's the thing. Even as the iteration changes, it's the same theme. Because did you take basically the theme that Mike made, Julius, and then kind of just?
No, actually, we had 2 different themes, and right in the beginning, we wrote 2 themes, and we were trying to decide when to use which one and which one to evolve. And I ended up staying on the show, and I was the last one standing, I guess.
Yeah.
With that, even beyond Buu and the others, and so actually it became not a headache, but a really good challenge for me later, what to do with those themes. And sometimes I would merge, actually towards the end, I would merge elements from the two by editing and adding layers. But there are two distinct themes for Buu. And we wrote that independently from each other, and they both worked out. I think became the basis of more the actiony, kind of more the action scenes and more the fight scenes, and kind of the heavier orchestral guitar mix.
Well, and I was gone by Super Buu.
Yeah,
I mean, that was all in your hands when that came up, you know. So yes, we
had a bunch of.
Buu transitioned many times too, right?
Yeah, what I liked about that theme, though, that there were so many other characters, just that kind of these random, not random, but you know, these guys who appear here and there, and they had their own themes, and then you have a relatively complex theme, not really complex because it's so complicated, but because you always have this weird character sometimes being cute and then, you know, blowing up a city, right? So this back and forth you had to musically paint, right? But then you interject this third character and this fourth character that still has to work into this mix of
with a totally different emotion to what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
that was a challenge, actually, scoring Dragon Ball in general. Maybe I've spaced for a second, but they would always do these reaction shots with like goofy characters on the side, and it was like, should I ignore this or should I change the feel of the music here?
I was
constantly struggling with that.
Yeah, and that's probably more difficult to deal with in the music editing, you know, that it is with, okay, I'm starting from a clean slate, right? To take pieces and then plop in.
It's always difficult because when you have a really serious fight, when it's literally about the life of 1 million people, you know, on screen, but they have a reaction shot of something like this slapstick, some stupid humor thing, and that's the reaction. And like, whoa, who changed the channel, you know? And then you have to change the composer.
So Scott, because you did a bit of Cell as well.
Did your power go out?
I don't know. You must have had a power cut.
Out there?
Yeah. Oh, well, it's back now. Anyway, so you did a bit of Imperfect Cell, and you did a remix of Perfect Cell as well, or Ultimate Cell.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So did you talk to Mike before you decided what you were doing, or you just did your own thing? Because
I actually didn't. I think
he probably just did his own thing.
Yeah. I think there was a scene where, Cell was returning. We thought he was dead, and it was Perfect Cell, and I wanted to use Mike's theme, but I wanted to have this epic, like, scary thing. So that's basically a rearrangement of his Perfect Cell theme, and I did it in a way that's almost unrecognizable because I changed the speed of it. You know, I played it really slow, and then I played it really fast. And if you study that, you'll hear there's various kind of rhythmic perversions of Mike's Perfect Cell theme in there. And then the Imperfect Cell stuff, that's an interesting one because what I thought of as the Imperfect Cell theme is not actually what starts out in that track. It's not even in that track. I think what I always thought of it as the Imperfect Cell theme was just this short little motif with dun da 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 dun bum ba dum bum ba da 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 dum, and the track that's on the CDs was a merging of a scene that I composed. I called it Cell Chases Kids, and it has all this crazy frenetic piano stuff, and then something that I matched up the Cell's footsteps, and then it goes into kind of an edited thing with some Mike's earlier heroic music, and then it goes into kind of Mike's take on my music. He like listened to what I had done and then did something similar to it, and developed his own thing from there. But the actual kind of gangster beat that I had written for Imperfect Cell was cut off from the original track that I had written, and
it's about 10 seconds or something, isn't it? That little.
Yeah, I think it's released somewhere in one of the soundtracks releases, but yeah. Anyway,
actually, I don't know about you guys, but this just reminded me that everyone likes to talk about these big themes, you know, the ones that became famous and whatnot. And I don't know about you, but I had the most fun working on these incidental, random stuff where you know that you put so much, whether it's composition or sound or something really interesting in it, because you know there's not going to get so much attention, so you don't have to go like by the expectations, but you can venture out a little bit and experiment with interesting, weird stuff. I'm
thinking like Droid's Steel Truck. I love that one.
That's awesome track because it goes from like Caribbean to heavy metal.
That might be a
banjo
different
music
track.
and stuff, right? I mean, it's all of, and another one, 16 rips off Cell's Tail is always
That one's
one of
awesome.
my favorites.
That one got used a
It is
lot.
all over the place, yeah.
That got used a lot in the series, yeah.
My favorite underrated track that I did was called Koronian Peroski. And I think there's a guy named Koi Koi who has it up as Koronian Peroski Arrive or whatever. But it was this glitzy thing for when they arrive in a pink helicopter and they get out and Koroni's throwing flowers and there's this big guy with a metal helmet and he's snorting and eating his helmet. And I did all this jazz. I got to show off my jazz chops in that track. And the fans, I think, have completely forgotten that track. But it's one of my favorites because I got to do all the stuff I learned at UNT.
You see, I have my list of those that the Great Saiyaman.
Ah, yes.
That little kind of those few episodes, I actually had a lot of fun working on those. I was trying to make like an over-the-top 80s adventure music, John Williams type of, you know, big orchestrated triple brass section, like, you know, that kind of stuff. And I did. And if you listen to it, it's actually pretty, like, given the short amount of time that we had and the samples that we had access to, it's a pretty...
And the lack of an actual orchestra to record it with.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Given what we had at the time, it's actually a pretty well, like, you know, I think it's a pretty good track, and it worked for the scene. So that's the most important. But actually, the first track that I did was the Space Room, and I
remember the Space Room.
I don't listen to my own music much, if at all. But that track I've heard a few times since. And I really enjoyed actually listening to that because I got to put in a lot of ambient, nice low sound design, little details like little pads, layering stuff, and that's my favorite thing to do anyway in my own music. And I think it has some nice depth, and I guarantee you that, you know, 99 out of 100 people will was like, okay, it's just some ambient thing in the background, but actually it took a lot of sound design consideration to put that.
I like that track. It has a nice feel to it. Like,
Space Room.
Yeah. Some of the ambient stuff is really, really good. I think I was listening to the Final Atonement theme, although that's not really what it is. But I think there are birds or something in that. Mike, did you compose that? The one that plays while in the episode Final Atonement, basically because there's a lot of parts of that episode where there's not really much talking, so that theme plays. It's almost like it's on a loop.
I think it's the one that we used in between songs in our live set.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the pad. Yeah.
It's quite an oldie. I think you
yeah, it is.
It goes back to like the Frieza saga. I think there's now people around like Koi Koi and like a lot of fans that have somehow found the ability to be able to take out a lot of that unreleased material and release it. I think you're quite well aware of it, Scott.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing job.
I don't know how they do it. I think they get the sound. They somehow get the audio from the Blu-rays. I think the Japanese and the English.
Does it have something to do with taking the left and right, inverting?
Yeah, and then they cancel out.
I don't know if they do that.
Stuff.
That's really hard to pull off with those. I think it's mostly about grabbing. I mean, that is a technique you can use, but I think it's really difficult to pull off in practice.
Yeah,
I think mostly what they're doing is
because we had a lot of stuff mixed in the center.
Yeah. So I think mostly what they're doing is they're taking a surround mix and they're grabbing like the stereo tracks, and then sound effects might be in the center and other places. And so they're able to, you know, grab the the channels that are least affected.
The left and right being the purest music, and then
and then dialogue
stuff.
Center channel, right?
Well,
So
dialogue is always center.
Right.
So if you remove the center, you have the music and some of the sound effects left. But of course, the sound effects at that time, the original Japanese sound effects, a lot of them were, if not all of them, mono. And so if you have stereo music but mono sound effects, then you can separate those based on phasing. So you take out the common information, and that's the sound effects. You have the different information, that's the music. You keep that, and you might have some.
Let me break it down into something even simpler. Like, you're familiar with these machines for karaoke, right? Where you can put in your favorite CD that has lyrics, and it'll remove it, right?
Yeah.
Usually the main lyrics are in the center of the mix, right? And the rest of the mix is kind of spread out in a stereo way, right? So if you take your left side and your right side and you duplicate them and then invert them and put the right side over the left side in the inverse and the opposite over here, then what happens is what's in the center gets canceled out and what's not in the center remains in the mix. Is that?
It's a great way to destroy a mix. I don't think they're doing a lot of that, to be honest. It is a technique you can use, but I think most of it is just grabbing the surround mix, removing the center channel. Because like Julius was saying, a lot of the sound effects are mono, so they might be just on center channel. I'm not sure. I haven't actually tried this before.
Or if they're not just on center channel, they could be evenly distributed throughout, right?
Yeah. They could be, and if that's the case, it's more difficult to get rid of. And you would need to do something like Mike is talking about, where you invert. But you're also going to destroy mono instruments that are in the mix. So that's a kind of funky way to do it. Yeah.
It sounds like something you'd need to dedicate a lot of time to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it must be pretty
So
nice.
kudos to those guys for doing it.
Yeah. Well, they're dedicating their lives to trying to release some of the unreleased material that you guys worked on.
Yeah. No, it's real cool. They're heroes of ours.
I'm sure you're heroes.
Yeah, totally.
You're heroes to them. You guys did a gig as well. You did a concert together, didn't you? I was watching it.
We've done three live shows now.
You've done one. I watched one on YouTube. It was very good.
Oh, well, you need to watch the others.
Man.
Include snippets in you can take snippets of our shows and put it in here because we're proud of them.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a good idea. Because did you guys have to get together and practice beforehand?
Yeah, practice for a few years.
Yeah. How was that possible? Because I mean, you live in Texas, Mike.
Okay, I'll give you the
Seattle.
quick history on it. When we did our first interview with Geekdom,
yeah,
the idea came up that maybe we should put a performance together, right?
Right.
And we hadn't seen each other in a long, long time, but it turned out we had a great time hanging out together. And it was like, yeah, why not? Why don't we do this? And so our first thing was that we went out to Seattle and stayed at Scott's, right? That's when we first started putting this stuff together, right? And that was in preparation for the first KamehaCon. And so then we spent, a long weekend over at Scott's place. And then a couple months later, these guys all came down to Dallas. Irving was where the KamehaCon was. And we got to rehearse it a little bit. And I think we had, 20?
At your place. Yeah.
My place. So 25 minutes of show at that point.
So what you have to realize is that these were just tracks that we wrote usually by ourselves, or we took, there was not a lot of dedicated collaboration. It might think it like looking at how we've credited things or whatever, but mostly we worked alone. We might version something off of what somebody else did just to make it fit the scene. But so getting these tracks arranged to be live,
you're talking about. Hold on, Scott.
On the show.
So
I'm talking about
you're
on the
saying
show. Yeah.
On the show originally, there was no intention of ever playing anything live, right?
Exactly.
So
that
was way outside of the bounds.
So we had to create new arrangements to this stuff for live. And we actually wrote new material to kind of extend things and make it a little more interesting, or just to change it, just to have it be a little more exciting, different. So there was a whole lot of work in just creating live versions of these tracks. It wasn't just practicing, like we were doing arranging work.
And then, of course, we had to implement that also for the performance itself. So tracks can be played seamlessly, that we're not doing just a playback from a machine, but there's really a live element. If we feel like you want to repeat a part, or, you know, by accident we get lost or anything like that, that we can find their way. So it's more than just a band coming together and playing, because of the nature of the instrumentation. That's, you know, close to impossible unless you have like 8 people on stage. And so,
or 10.
Yeah, so we had to put things into Ableton Live and trigger it, and then practice the triggering itself. And I think the biggest challenge is that, I mean, Mike, you play live shows, and I play live shows, and we know how much practicing really matters before every show. And even once you know your band, it's still healthy to practice, especially when you have a new material. You have to. And that's not given to us because, like you said, Reese, we're in a triangle, like 3 different locations, and we just can't. I mean, even with Zoom, and it's great and low latency, but it's still not good enough for musicians to really play it in real time. And so that's always a challenge. When we have a show, we have to actually get there 2 days at least, but that's the very minimum in advance, and, you know, try to practice on our own before that, and then practice together, which also is, you know, changes everything, of course, again, how we do things. And then we always hope that the show comes out right.
So you can imagine, we might show up to a convention and they have a lot of things planned for us. Like, you know, we want you to do a meet and greet over here, and, you know, we want you to come and show up at this thing, you know, Thursday and Friday or whatever, and then do table time and it's like, we only have time to rehearse before the show. It's going to be solid rehearsal before the show.
And by the way,
we haven't played together for months, right?
It's a miracle that we made those shows. I think it's how did we do that?
And if any convention organizer is watching this, and if you want us to play for you, then just expect that our number 1 request is a rehearsal room, because we really
and the time to use it.
Because one time we rehearsed in a hotel room on like the 70th floor or wherever that was.
It was my hotel room.
Yeah, it was yours. But yeah, that's not the way to do it, because literally it was like cables everywhere, and it's just, you know.
We were very lucky that we didn't get the police called on us.
Yeah,
I was surprised we didn't. Yeah.
So what's the plan now? Are you guys doing? I know you've done some stuff for Call of Duty, Scott, and you've worked on films, Julius. Like, do you guys prefer working on television series or film work, or would you do video games? I mean, that's $1 billion industry.
I'm going to go ahead and speak for both of them and say, yeah, whatever you got.
You'd be down for whatever, Mike.
Whatever you got, throw it my way, please.
I haven't done much in the way of professional composing. I mean, I wrote a piece for a guy. I think I got paid $1,000 or something back in, what year was that? 2015. And then in 2002, I did a soundtrack for a game. But mostly I've been, since 2005, my main gig has been engineering work. I've been C++. Like, I do audio software engineering. So it's like, well, my work for Call of Duty was not composing. I owned taking the PS4 audio code and the Xbox One audio code and transferring it translating it so it could work on a PS3 and Xbox 360. So there was a lot of audio know-how in there, but it was mostly C++ and talking to sound designers and composers and kind of making all the tech work. And I've written music for Microsoft. I've written music for Roland, the companies that I work for, just to demo technology. So sometimes my music will pop up in strange places.
There is, where can people find the video with your guitar patch, your classical guitar patch that you created?
For Roland, I made a thing called Terra Guitar, in combination with Jeremy and Julian Soul. It's on Roland Cloud's YouTube channel. There's a video of me demonstrating a thing called Terra Guitar, which it sounds like a classical guitar. That was a really fun project. Yeah. That was a super fun project. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe get to do more stuff like that in the future.
Let me speak for Julius for a second. His Forgotten Future stuff is incredible. It's wonderful, wonderful.
Oh,
music.
yeah, I've heard it. It's amazing.
All right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
If you don't have a copy of the CD, you got to have that too. And I implore everyone to go out there and purchase one, because it's a work of art in itself, you know, and looking at it while you're listening to the music that he composed, it's fantastic.
You can tell that a lot more time is been put into that, Julius, like your Forgotten Future.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it's really, really good stuff.
As for your question about film and television, for me it was a little bit different. I parted with Faulconer Productions in 2006, I believe. Yeah, 2006. And so I was basically working on the Soundtrack releases and engineering those and mastering and whatnot, editing and doing a bunch of that work. And then when we parted ways, I decided to really focus on rebuilding my music production company that I had before I ever joined the gang here back in Europe, where I'm from originally. So I kind of rebuilt that, and I did a good amount of scoring, movies, television shows, Hollywood advertising, all that stuff, to the point where I was very happy that I had that experience, and I would do it again. But I was also happy to stop doing that. And in 2012, I actually changed careers to a degree, because I went into education. So I'm now teaching how to do the job that we used to do to the composers of the future and the sound designers of the future. But
not
speaking
the
of the future, yep. At the same time, I really focused on my own kind of music releases and concepts, like you mentioned, and I do shows and try to do some interesting, cool stuff. Just threw in this background for today. That was a show that I did last year at the LA Convention Center, where the audience was controlling the music. So that was like a Forgotten Future type of show, but with a twist that the audience was using their cell phones to control the music that was playing my music, right? But they were controlling different parts and different plugins and filters and elements, and I was trying to react to what the audience was deciding to do. So like an interactive show. And so I'm
That's super cool.
That is super cool.
Just enjoy networking for the industry.
I gotta say that I've written not a lot, but I've been writing since then. But my favorite writing was doing it for Dragon Ball Z, and I think a lot of it had to do with the constraints that are put on you when you're writing to picture. And it doesn't matter if it's TV or film, but if you've got time constraints that you've got to live within, and you've got to write for a character, you've got to write for a scene, you've got to write for a mood, all these things. Those kind of constraints that are put on you can for me, I think they bring out the best. It's like, not, hey, you need to write this, but you need to write for this, and it needs to work for this. And I really, really like that challenge.
I found that really attractive as well. For me, it got a little bit too much when your livelihood depends on composing pretty much 24/7. then that starts influencing things in your brain a little bit differently about composition. And I'm not saying it's bad or wrong, but I had way too many of my own ideas filed away somewhere for the future that I didn't ever see happening because I was busy working for directors and for producers who you might have heard of the movie Zohan. It's an Adam Sandler movie that came out.
I saw it recently. It's brilliant.
21 versions of the same piece over 2 days. 21 versions.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
That's what it takes. So, when those are the kind of constraints that they tell you very nicely what they expect, and then you write 5 versions and they say, yeah, we kind of like that, and how about we do this, and how about we redo what we had done in the past and then bring it back anyway, even though it was rejected one time because you were right, but we're not going to say that. So when you the 22nd version and that makes it into the movie, then there's nothing wrong with it. It's not a complaint, but it's a very different lifestyle than what we had with Dragon Ball Z. And certainly
speaking to that, Julius, I got to say, I think that one of the things that we didn't do too much of with Dragon Ball Z was write by committee. And that happened a little bit. There were some times where it was like, no, it doesn't feel right to me. You got to do that. But for the most part, we would go our separate ways, write something, and then it would be like, yeah, that works, right?
Exactly. So how can you take it further if you become your own director?
Right. Hey, what's Torres? One of these directors writes his own music. Gets away with it.
John Carpenter wrote.
John Carpenter. There you go. Yeah.
The creative arts is a really interesting industry because you never promise tomorrow, really. You're not guaranteed an income usually on a week-by-week basis. I suppose unless you're working on a series like you were with Dragon Ball Z. So
you're always working towards unemployment is what you're doing.
Yeah. So is it exciting and terrifying at the same time because you're not knowing exactly where your next paycheck's going to come from?
I think Julius has done the most of that. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a very simple answer. You have to diversify, especially these days. So just to say, I'm a composer, I'm willing to work on TV shows, but maybe if you throw me a movie, then good luck. That's just not going to happen. But when I was running my music production company, even though it was a music production company, and that was my main discipline and favorite, part of the activity, but I was doing a lot of mixing. I worked with every kind of bands you can imagine. In 2010, I launched one of the very first, not automated, but online mastering business when they were just nowhere. There was no land or anything like that kind of crap that, these days you upload and AI masters the crap out of it. So everything
right. It wasn't an automatic mastering. You were actually getting the work and mastering it and then sending it back, right?
I hired a company who created the interface for me, which at that time before HTML5 wasn't as easy running server-side Java, even just to find a server who would support that, where a user can literally drag their folder or their music files into the interface, and that would upload, create a folder, notify me that someone uploaded their mix. So it downloads for me, and all I have to do is drag it into Pro Tools, master it, put it back, and it sends a notification to them that your master is ready to download. So
what I was getting at though is nowadays, isn't it more of an automated thing where they just, you upload it and they throw a multi-band compressor against it and send it back to you, and that's.
There's even an app now that does automated mixing. Even you can just get the app and do automated mixing.
It's actually funny you guys are saying
throw your stems into it.
2 days from now, I'm going to be on a panel. This is an AES, Audio Engineering Society online event, and the panel is about AI's role in music production and audio production. And there are going to be 6 panelists, and I think one of them is not very happy about AI stuff. The other one is really not happy. That's me. And then there are a couple of professionals from Isotope, who is behind a lot of the AI initiatives. and a couple of people who have their own companies that do AI-based audio tools. So wish me luck with that debate.
Yeah,
but,
man.
Hey, good luck. Hey,
good luck.
Can I tune in?
Sure, send you an invite. Yep.
Yeah, please do.
Should post a link. I'm actually, as of about a week ago, in between jobs, and one of the jobs that I noticed, I didn't apply for it, but one of them that I saw online was for a company that's how I knew about it, was because there's a company that has a product that you do automated mixing, and they're looking for a C++ engineer.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. But do you guys have social media? Where's the best place where everyone can like follow you and your music for one?
Well, why don't we give you a link to our? I think honestly, our YouTube page is the best place to find the. You need our Facebook page, and we want people to sign up for that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think we even have our YouTube videos on our Facebook page because we're terrible with social media. So we need to clean up our act there.
Well, being off social media is kind of a good thing. It can get you into a negative headspace, I think, if you're on it too much. A lot of negativity.
Well, we're not on it too much. Yeah, so we'll give you the links to the YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, and I'll post it all on Spotify and YouTube and wherever else this podcast ends up. It ends up on a lot of sites.
And we've got our individual pages too. Like I have my Morgan Studios stuff, and which has a lot of.
I have an out-of-date YouTube thing, but it's got some videos on there.
Yeah,
I have a Forgotten Future online experience where you can remix the layers of my music and the images change with it, and you can create your own experience.
That sounds stupid.
Cool, man.
Yeah, it is.
Such a buzzkill, Mike. Oh,
God.
Well, I'll wrap up here. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you share, like, and subscribe, and obviously listen to all three of these amazing guys' music. Go back and listen to the stuff that they did at Dragon Ball Z as well. These are three amazing dudes that don't get the props they deserve, in my opinion. So that's the show, everyone.
Man.
Stay safe.